Every winter storm forces people to make choices. But in January 2026, one storm across Ontario pushed people into decisions where none of the options felt safe. When a deep polar cold collided with moisture from the Great Lakes, things escalated fast. Snow didn't drift down quietly. It slammed into the province in thick, blinding waves. Within hours, visibility vanished. Winds howled. Roads disappeared beneath layers of ice and snow. Power lines went down. And suddenly, people stopped asking, how bad will this get? Instead, the question became, what do we do right now? For drivers, the first impossible decision came quickly. Do you keep moving through a whiteout you can barely see through, or do you stop on a highway that might stay closed for half a day? Some tried to push forward and crashed. Others pulled over and became stranded, turning their vehicles into temporary shelters. People sat for 10, 12, even 14 hours, carefully rationing fuel as temperatures plunged well below freezing. Back at home, families faced their own tough calls. Do you clear the snow immediately, risking injury or exhaustion? Or do you wait, knowing the wait could damage your roof later? Vents vanished under deep drifts. Generators ran non-stop. Every choice carried consequences, and doing nothing was often just as dangerous as acting too fast. For emergency crews, the pressure was relentless. Do you send responders into near-zero visibility, or do you pull back, knowing people are stuck in freezing cars and dark homes? Ambulances couldn't reach certain areas. Snowmobiles took their place, and eventually, military assistance was requested. Not for show, but because local systems had reached their breaking point. What made this storm different wasn't just the snowfall totals. It wasn't only the cold. It was the constant decision-making, hour after hour, under stress, fatigue, and uncertainty. There was no pause button, no reset. Snowmageddon wasn't just a weather event. It was a test of judgment, resilience, and survival, played out in real time across Ontario. This wasn't about courage. It was about judgment. And by the time the snowfall finally eased, the most dangerous decision still hadn't arrived. Because in storms like this, the quiet that follows can be more deadly than the chaos itself. The first critical choice came fast, and for many people, it came behind the wheel. As Snowmageddon tightened its grip across Ontario, drivers quickly realized the situation was unraveling much faster than anyone had predicted. Snowfall intensified without warning. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Strong winds wiped away the road ahead in seconds. Lane markings disappeared. Shoulders faded out. In some places, drivers couldn't even see the brake lights of the car directly in front of them. And in that moment, every driver faced the same question. Do you keep moving, or do you stop and wait it out? For those who tried to push forward, the danger was immediate. Whiteout conditions turned highways into tunnels of guesswork. Transport trucks jackknifed, blocking lanes instantly. One collision triggered another, not because of speed, but because there was nothing left to guide the eye. Driving became instinct instead of control. But stopping came with its own risks. Once traffic ground to a halt, snow began to pile up fast. Vehicles that pulled over were soon boxed in as drifts climbed toward door handles. Engines were started in short intervals to save fuel. Heaters were rationed. People waited for 10, 12, even 14 hours, with no clear way forward or back. Emergency alerts urged stranded drivers to stay inside their vehicles. It sounded counterintuitive, but stepping out into near-zero visibility and brutal wind chills was far more dangerous. Rescue crews couldn't reach everyone right away. Snowplows were trapped behind jackknifed trucks. Tow vehicles couldn't break through. That's when a highway stops being a road and becomes a waiting room. For many people, that first decision, whether to move or stay put, shaped everything that followed for the rest of the storm. Those who kept driving for too long risked crashing. Those who stopped too early risked freezing in place. There was no perfect choice, only trade-offs measured in time, fuel, and heat. Snowmageddon didn't begin with panic. It began with a decision made in seconds on roads that were slowly disappearing under the storm. Once traffic stalled and people were forced indoors, a second critical decision emerged. One that sounded simple, but wasn't. As the storm continued across Ontario, heavy, wet snow piled up faster than many homeowners had ever experienced. Driveways vanished, front doors became sealed shut, furnace vents disappeared beneath compacted drifts. On rooftops, the snow didn't just sit there. It compressed. Layer by layer, light snowfall turned into dense, dangerous weight. That's when the question spread from house to house. Do you clear the snow now, or do you wait? Clearing it early came with real danger. Winds were still strong, visibility was poor, ladders shifted, roof snow moved without warning. One slip could mean a fall onto frozen ground. Emergency officials warned that many winter injuries don't happen during the storm itself, but during cleanup. Still, leaving the snow untouched was just as risky. Temperatures hovered near freezing before an expected plunge. The snow absorbed moisture and grew heavier by the hour. Roof loads increased quickly, especially on older homes, barns, and garages. Buried furnace and dryer vents created another invisible threat: carbon monoxide, building silently inside homes that otherwise felt safe. People tried to find a middle ground. Some cleared only what mattered most: vents, narrow exit paths, one side of the roof. Others waited, listening for creaks overhead, watching roof lines sag under the weight. Every decision felt cautious, calculated, tense. This stage of the storm changed how people behaved. Everyday tasks became safety evaluations. Shoveling wasn't exercise, it was risk management. Stepping outside wasn't fresh air, it was exposure. And Snowmageddon was far from over. Snowmageddon exposed a hard truth. Winter danger doesn't always arrive with noise and force. Sometimes it arrives quietly, settling in, growing heavier with time, and forcing people to choose between action and restraint without knowing which one is safer. In storms like this, doing nothing can be dangerous, but doing too much can be worse. The storm wasn't finished forcing decisions yet. As Snowmageddon tightened its grip on Ontario, a quieter crisis unfolded behind closed doors. Power lines snapped under the weight of ice-laden snow. Transformers failed. Entire neighborhoods went dark, some for hours, others for days. As temperatures slid toward -10 Fahrenheit, electricity stopped being a convenience. It became heat. It became safety. It became time. That's when families faced the next impossible choice. Do you use what power you have aggressively, or do you conserve everything for what might come next? In homes where electricity remained, heaters ran non-stop. Every degree mattered. But constant use strained systems already under pressure, increasing the risk of further outages. For homes without power, the choices were even harder. Run a generator longer and risk running out of fuel, or ration it and watch indoor temperatures steadily fall. Use space heaters sparingly or not at all. Stay put and hope conditions improve, or try to reach a warming center through streets buried in snow. Carbon monoxide became an invisible threat. Furnace exhaust vents disappeared beneath drifts. Improper generator use turned garages into deadly traps. Officials repeated the warnings: clear vents, never run engines indoors, check on neighbors by phone. But warnings don't clear roads, and they don't restore power. They simply push responsibility back onto households making decisions in the dark. People adapted in quiet, deliberate ways. Rooms were sealed off to hold warmth. Cooking was reduced. Phone batteries were preserved. Families slept in layers, watching indoor temperatures the way they usually watch the forecast. The storm had moved inside. Utility crews worked around the clock, but access was limited. Bucket trucks couldn't reach rural lines. Ice slowed every repair. Jobs that normally took minutes stretched into hours under wind and freezing rain. And as the hours passed, one thing became clear. Snowmageddon wasn't just testing infrastructure. It was testing how long people could manage uncertainty, one careful decision at a time. Restoration timelines kept changing. Hours turned into vague estimates, then into days. Families were forced to decide whether to wait it out or leave and try to find shelter somewhere else. This stage of Snowmageddon wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was pressure. Quiet, constant pressure. The kind that slowly wears people down. Every hour without power narrowed the options. Every decision traded comfort for endurance. And as the cold deepened, the cost of choosing wrong kept climbing. By the time roads were fully buried and outages spread across the province, emergency agencies faced their own impossible question. Do you keep sending crews into worsening conditions, or do you pull back and wait, knowing people is still stranded? Snowmageddon pushed first responders to the edge of capacity. Visibility dropped to near zero. Winds gusted past 40 miles an hour. Snowdrifts rose higher than vehicle hoods. Standard ambulances couldn't get through. Tow trucks stalled. Snowplows were trapped behind jackknifed transport trucks. In many places, the fastest route to help wasn't a road anymore. It was open snow. Command centers shifted into triage mode. Calls were prioritized strictly by immediate threat to life. And that meant impossible decisions. A stranded driver running low on fuel, or a medical emergency in a home without heat. A highway rescue, or a power-dependent patient who couldn't survive the night. Every deployment carried risk, not just for the people waiting, but for the crews being sent in. Responders adapted. Snowmobiles and tracked all-terrain vehicles replaced ambulances. Teams navigated by memory and landmarks because street signs were buried. Progress slowed to a crawl. Miles per hour replaced minutes. Some rescues took hours to reach locations that normally take moments. When civilian resources reached their limit, authorities requested help from the Canadian Armed Forces. That decision wasn't symbolic, it was practical. Military vehicles could move where others couldn't. They could tow what standard equipment couldn't budge. And they could operate in conditions too dangerous for normal response. This phase revealed the hardest truth of extreme winter disasters. Emergency services are designed to surge. They are not designed to cover an entire province all at once. When everything fails simultaneously, help becomes selective, and every decision on the ground and in command centers carries weight. Snowmageddon wasn't just overwhelming systems, it was exposing their limits. Waiting became part of survival. For responders, the decision was never about bravery. It was about calculation, balancing risk, distance, and time. And during Snowmageddon, time was the one thing no one had enough of. When the snowfall finally began to ease, many people felt the same instinct: to move, to dig out, to drive, to fix what the storm had damaged. But Snowmageddon wasn't done forcing decisions. In many ways, the most dangerous moment came after the snow slowed. As the system pulled away from Ontario, it dragged bitter cold in behind it. Temperatures dropped fast. What had been heavy, wet snow hardened almost overnight. Roads turned to ice. Snowbanks set like concrete. Vehicles that survived the storm became frozen in place. Doors sealed shut by ice and compacted drifts. This was the flash freeze phase. Quiet, deceptive, unforgiving. And once again, people faced the same question. Do you act now, or do you wait? Acting came with risk. Clearing roofs and driveways in extreme cold increased the chance of injury. Snow slabs that had seemed stable hours earlier could shift without warning. Ladders slipped, muscles fatigued fast in sub-zero temperatures. And with medical access still limited by road conditions, help could come slow to arrive. Waiting carried danger too. Buried furnace vents increased carbon monoxide risk. Power outages stretched on with every passing hour, pushing indoor temperatures lower with every passing hour. Ice locked damage in place, making repairs harder and more dangerous the longer they were delayed. For some families, waiting meant trusting that systems would hold just a little longer. Emergency calls shifted again. Fewer crashes, but more injuries tied to cleanup efforts, cold exposure, and exhaustion. Warming centers stayed open all the clock. Officials urged patience and caution, knowing that rushed decisions during this phase could undo days of careful survival. Snowmageddon didn't end with a dramatic moment. It faded slowly through restraint, exhaustion, and waiting. And for many across Ontario, the storm's final lesson was clear. Sometimes survival isn't about doing more, it's about knowing when to stop and when to wait. This moment, Snowmageddon revealed its final lesson. Extreme winter disasters don't end neatly. They fade slowly, forcing people to manage risk long after the headlines move on. Survival isn't decided by one dramatic moment. It's shaped by restraint, timing, and knowing not to push forward.
Snowmageddon never asked for heroics. It demanded judgment right up until the very end. When the blizzard finally loosened its grip, Ontario didn't snap back to normal. Roads opened gradually. Power returned one neighborhood at a time. Cleanup stretched from days into weeks. But what lingered most wasn't the towering snowbanks or damaged infrastructure. It was the aftershock. This storm showed that extreme winter disasters aren't defined by a single impact. They're defined by a chain of decisions, made under pressure, with incomplete information and no perfect options. Drive or stop, clear the snow or wait, use power or conserve it, send help or pull back, act immediately or wait for conditions to improve. Every choice carries risk, and survival depends far more on judgment than on strength. For many viewers, this story will feel familiar. Great Lakes snow systems are still active. Arctic air still pushes south every winter. Highways, power grids, and emergency services continue to be tested again and again. What happened during Snowmageddon wasn't a one-off event. It's a scenario that can unfold anywhere when winter exceeds expectations and refuses to let go. This storm exposed a hard truth. Modern systems are built for averages, not endurance. They work until multiple failures happen at once. And when that happens, community becomes the final safety net. Neighbors check on neighbors. People choose patience over panic. First responders weigh risk against reach, knowing they can't be everywhere at once. If you found this breakdown clear and useful, consider giving the video a like. It helps more people find calm, objective coverage of extreme weather events. Share this video with anyone interested in storms, natural disasters, or emergency preparedness. And subscribe to the channel if you want more in-depth analysis of how weather truly impacts the systems we rely on. Now, we'd like to hear from you. If a storm like this hit your area, which decision do you think would be the hardest, and why? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Stay informed, stay prepared, and we'll see you in the next episode.